What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you right now. Hurricane Beryl is currently impacting Jamaica very seriously as we are speaking. The southern half of the island is expected to undergo or is undergoing hurricane force winds, with the eye wall potentially going to be grazing the extreme southern part of Jamaica. As the system has shifted a little bit further to the south than anticipated, a landfall is not likely at this current point in time. I repeat, a landfall is not likely. It's going to make a very close pass to Jamaica as a Category 4 hurricane as it approaches the Cayman Islands and then the Yucatan Peninsula. But what we've been seeing right now, we've been seeing a lot of videos and a lot of photos of damage that's been going on in Jamaica. It's going to be a very serious storm. The good news is it's a lot better than I thought it would be, because it looks like the northern half is getting tropical storm force winds and the southern half is only getting hurricane force winds, and the eye wall has stayed offshore at this current point in time. So let's go ahead and dive right into the whole situation as it unfolds. So here's the cliff notes that we have according to the cone. It is now a 140 mile per hour Category 4 hurricane moving through Jamaica as we speak. It is expected to be moving towards the Yucatan Peninsula, making landfall very early on Friday, before moving out by the evening as a tropical storm. It is then expected to enter the Gulf of Mexico and then start to reorganize and re-intensify into a hurricane before making landfall near the U.S.-Mexico border, according to the National Hurricane Center. Let's go ahead and read you the public advisory that we have right here. Once again, winds of 140 miles per hour, staying just offshore of Jamaica at this current point in time, which is some very good news. It is moving at 18 miles per hour. Minimum central pressure has been steadily rising to 959 millibars at this current point in time. Remember, a hurricane warning is in effect for Jamaica, Grand Cayman, Little Cayman, and Cayman Brac. Now hurricane warnings are in effect for the Yucatan Peninsula and parts of Cancun over here, all the way down to the Mexico-Belize border over here. So we have to take this very seriously at this current point in time. A lot of areas in the Yucatan are going to get very impacted by this hurricane. Tropical storm warnings are in effect for parts of the Yucatan Peninsula as well as the south coast of Haiti. So we're going to have to pay attention to that. Tropical storm watch is in effect for the coast of Belize. So we're going to have to keep a very close eye on it. Once again, hurricane force winds only extend outward 45 miles from the center, and tropical storm force winds now extend outward 185 miles from the center. So the system has been growing in size gradually as it's been approaching the Yucatan Peninsula. So overall, this is going to be a very serious situation. I'm curious of what the storm surge, 6 to 9 feet of storm surge, is expected for part of the coasts of Jamaica, and then the Yucatan Peninsula could be up to 3 to 5 feet, although it might be a bit higher as the system gets closer. Part of the reasons I'm a little worried about this thing not making landfall in Jamaica is it's going to remain very strong as it approaches the Yucatan Peninsula. I know the discussion by the time it gets there has it at about a 105 mile per hour Category 2 hurricane, but based off of what I've been seeing and based off of how slow this thing's been weakening, personally, it could very well be a major hurricane by the time it approaches the Yucatan Peninsula based off of what we've been seeing so far. It's been battling 30 knots of wind shear like hell. It's been doing a fantastic job fighting back. It's slowly been losing ground, but it's very impressive how much it's been fighting as we've been seeing this. It's definitely not the system we saw 2 days ago. It's not the annular hurricane we saw 2 days ago. But what it is doing is it's absolutely fighting back, and it's just quite frankly just been exceeding all expectations at this current point. This is where we were about 2 days ago now, as this thing was an annular structure moving through the Antilles. You start to see the shear start to pick up on it a little bit as it approaches Jamaica right there. The Dominican Republic gets heavily impacted by the thunderstorms. You start to see it get sheared off. The shear does get stronger as the system gets closer to Jamaica, but still putting up one hell of a fight as this thing continues to move on. Definitely going to have to keep you guys updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel as we get more information coming out and more data to take a look at. Let's go ahead and show you the track models that we have pulled up and the intensity models. Track models are pretty interesting. The track models from yesterday have shifted this a little bit further to the south. Before, we were seeing generally a landfall spot in South Texas. Now it's down to near the U.S.-Mexico border at this current point, although South Texas Texas could absolutely see impacts, and I still believe a South Texas landfall is plausible at this current point in time. Intensity models are also pretty interesting, and similar to what the NHC is doing, it's going to move through the Yucatan Peninsula, and it's going to bounce back a little bit up to hurricane strength. We're not 100% sure how strong it's going to get because, number one, we have a lot of unknowns in the Gulf of Mexico. We have a lot of unknowns regarding the wind shear and the dry air at this current point in time, but what is absolutely not an unknown is how hot the water is and how much ocean heat content is going to be in it. Here's the global sea surface temperatures that we are seeing at this current point in time. If you guys have noticed so far, even though this thing was a Category 5 hurricane at one point, the waters have not cooled down. The reason that is because this system is moving way too fast, and the immediate effects are almost minuscule at this current point across much of the Caribbean Sea. Typically, you would have, as a system is moving through a body of ocean, you typically see a bit of a cold wake, that's called, right behind it. You're not seeing it with Beryl at this current point, primarily because of the situation at hand where we have this thing moving at 18 to 22 miles per hour on average. But outside of a few meters maybe down below the surface of the waters, it's not really affecting it that much, and it's also not affecting the ocean heat content associated with it. What you're seeing right here, this is from the last 24 hours. You're seeing that OHC still being over 125. You're still seeing that OHC be well over 150 in a lot of areas in the Caribbean Sea. The reason for this is because the OHC isn't really doing very much. It's not calming down. It's not going down at all because this thing is moving at such a fast speed. And even if it did, and it also applies to the global sea surface temperatures here, even if it did, we still have 2 months before the waters are at their warmest, which means that they can easily recover even before the peak of hurricane season and just make things even worse down the road. Matter of fact, I've said this for several days now. This is going to be setting the tone for what the next hurricane season is going to be like. Again, I'm not saying that there's going to be Cat 5s everywhere. I'm just saying there's going to be a lot more named storms and a lot more hurricanes in association with them. Most likely not Cat 5s because you need almost perfect conditions for that to happen, and that's what Beryl's been doing. And it's even been fighting all the shear out that it's been doing. Unfortunately, it is, rather fortunately for everyone else, but unfortunately for the hurricane, it's fighting a relatively losing battle because where the wind shear that it is in, it's definitely around 25 to 30 knots at this current point in time. And no major hurricane can really just fight and win against that. And all this wind shear is going to mainly persist unless this thing completely weakens unexpectedly until it gets to the Yucatan Peninsula, which if it does weaken down to maybe 20 or even 15 knots, then you could have a situation where the structure starts to improve and you could start to see some robust intensification once again, or it maintains itself until it gets to the Yucatan. Either way, I still believe this could be a major hurricane by the time it gets there, just based off the trends that we are seeing, based off of everything that we are looking at this current point in time. So yeah, it's been a very serious situation that we're paying attention to. Hurricane Hunter Reconnaissance has been out dealing with this right here. It's been documenting all the pressure. It's been documenting all the flight level winds, SFMRs. We had some data last night that had this thing potentially up to Category 5 strength. However, the NHC didn't really agree with that and downgraded it down to 150, which, based off the trends and based off the fact that it's fighting a ton of shear, I can definitely understand the decision going into that. Something to pay attention to, but still you got to keep a very close eye on it at this current point. But Beryl is now not the only system that we have to watch because, ladies and gentlemen, we have Invest 96L that is back and just alive and breathing right here. Invest 96L is over the Windward Islands, kind of where Hurricane Beryl made landfall, which really heightened my concern for flash flooding, especially with this system moving through. And now we have a situation where we could see another disturbance organizing and developing. Again, the probability of that right now is very low, but hey, we've seen it already this hurricane season. Things are subject to change. Here's the situation that we have right here. A tropical wave located near the Windward Islands continues to produce an area of disorganized shower and thunderstorm activity. Development, if any, of the system should be slow to occur while it moves around 20 to 25 miles per hour westward to west-northwestward across the Caribbean. Regardless of development, gusty winds and heavy rainfall are possible. 20% chance of formation in the next 7 days. While we're on the subject, I want to go ahead and see what the dry air looks like across a lot of these regions, as well as 96L as it moves through. The dry air, it's not getting into the system. What the wind shear does in tandem with dry air is it kills the system from the inside out and potentially triggers an eyewall replacement cycle. And from then on out, it just degrades. But this is not happening at this current point. The wind shear is only 25 knots where it's at, and it's not letting any dry air. The core is so well protected at this current point, it's unbelievable what's happening. And speaking of dry air, there's not very much dry air left. It's going to be moving towards the Yucatan Peninsula in a relatively moist layer of air at this current point. The dry air is just isolated to this part of the Caribbean Sea. None of that's going to affect the hurricane. The only thing that can really stop it at this point is shear, and if that shear collapses, that we're seeing, which is 25 knots of it, if we start to see a collapse of that shear, we could see the structure recover and start to see even more intensification or a sustaining hurricane as it approaches the Yucatan. So the next couple of days are going to be very important for what's going to be happening, especially as we get to the Yucatan Peninsula and even further out as we get into Texas, because I know a lot of people from the Houston area or South Texas are watching this video and are very concerned about that. Another thing I want to pay attention to very quickly before we get to the shear and moisture forecast is this Invest 96L. It is going to be moving through some dry air, but it's overall with the wind shear at this current point, it's in a pocket of very low wind shear below where Beryl's outflow was killing it before. And 96L, what we're seeing at this current point, very pocket of low wind shear, not going to really do much, and it's not going to really let any dry air get into the system or stop it or anything like that. But probability of development is still relatively low, so we're going to have to pay attention to that. Let's go ahead and pull up the shear and the moisture forecasts now. Let's go ahead and show you that right here in the Western Atlantic. This is going to be for 96L and Beryl as it moves towards the Antilles, not towards the Antilles, it's already past there, towards the Yucatan, towards Texas, and throughout the Caribbean, respectively. So here's what we have going on. We're going to go ahead and show you the 0Z European, because this is the most accurate forecast, in my opinion. So let's go ahead and show you that. Here's the 0Z. Wind shear is expected to kind of hinder at Beryl for a little bit, and it's expected to continue as it moves through the Yucatan, towards the Yucatan, although we are starting to see a bit of a weakening of wind shear as it approaches the Yucatan before it makes landfall as a hurricane and then moves into the Gulf of Mexico, where we do start to see a bit of a structure reorganization and redevelopment as the wind shear does appear to calm down quite a bit as it enters the Caribbean. A lot of this is due to the outflow and due to the structure of the hurricane, so that's why it's showing wind shear right there. But the wind shear in general, you're not seeing very much of it outside of an isolated pocket or two as it approaches land over there and as this thing continues to organize and develop. And so we're seeing definitely a decrease of wind shear at this current point in time across a lot of these regions. So if you're in Mexico and Texas, you got to watch out for this. Here's the moisture component to all of this, relative humidity forecast. Yeah, like I said, there's some dry air around, but that's not going to really do that much. So we're not seeing a dry air intrusion or anything like that across the point. And we're even going to see an increase of moisture into the Caribbean, from the Caribbean Sea into the Gulf of Mexico as the system starts to reorganize in a relatively low wind sheared environment before making landfall. So that's something we're going to have to pay attention to. As for 96L, it's in a pocket of very moist air that's going to continue to be very moist as we get deeper into the forecast right there. Overall probability of development isn't very high, primarily due to the wind shear that's going to be after Beryl. So we're going to have to pay attention to all of that going forward at this current point in time. Now let's go ahead and pull up the hurricane forecasts right here for Beryl as we watch the threat for Jamaica, as we watch the threat for the Yucatan, and as we watch the threat for Texas. So ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be what we have right here. This is the thing we're going to have to watch. We're going to go ahead and start with the H-Wharf. I want to go ahead and start with the 0Z, the H-Wharf, just to kind of give you a comparison, because we've been seeing with the H-Wharf kind of a bit of a shift from the 0Z. So we're going to run these runs first, and then we'll go to the 12Z to kind of see how this has changed. The 0Z H-Wharf had this thing making a close pass to Jamaica. Yeah, that's pretty much what's happening right now. Close pass to the Cayman Islands, and then it moves through and approaches the Yucatan Peninsula as a Category 2 or Category 3 hurricane and moves through there, definitely weakens due to land interaction, but doesn't weaken as much as you would expect because, once again, the Yucatan Peninsula is pretty flat, but there is an arid climate over there, so that's part of the reason why these systems weaken the way they do. And then the system starts to reorganize and redevelop as it approaches Mexico and Texas right there. And as we get closer to the to land over here, as we get closer to South Texas near Corpus Christi, this thing is making landfall, at least according to the H-WRF, as a Category 2 hurricane at this current run right here. This is the 0Z. Let's go ahead and show you the 6Z. 6Z is pretty interesting as well. Similar situation, although the H-WRF wanted this thing getting very close to Jamaica and very close to the Cayman Islands before approaching the Yucatan Peninsula, weakening due to land interaction, then starting to reorganize and redevelop in a relatively low sheared environment. Matter of fact, I don't think we can pull that up, unfortunately, on these kinds of hurricane models. So I'll see if the H-WRF parent can do that for us. But here's the 6Z as it approaches Texas right here, potentially making landfall there as a potential major hurricane at the 6Z run. H-WRF parent, let's see if we can do that right here just to take a look at that. We'll show you the 6Z right here just to see if we can find the, let's go ahead and show you the shear. The shear is all to the north of it in both of these model runs right here, and it's at an angle that could really help enhance the outflow still, as we've been seeing with Beryl. So definitely something to pay attention to, and potentially a very real possibility of happening. But in the meantime, we're going to have to continue to keep an eye on it. And here's the 12Z that we have right here. Different situation than the 0Z and 6Z, which kind of shows you that the models can change in a day or so. The H-WRF wants this thing to make landfall as a tropical storm in the Yucatan Peninsula, which in my opinion is really low considering the fact that we're only dealing with 25 knots of wind shear, and the system is sustaining itself extremely well. And then the system starts to slowly reorganize and redevelop as it approaches land right there. It makes landfall as a strong tropical storm or a weak hurricane, according to this right here. I'm going to be honest with you right here. Considering the fact that this is advocating for a strong tropical storm landfall and not taking into account that this thing has just been sustaining itself for so long, I'm not too inclined to trust it, but I will keep an eye on it, as this is a very real possibility at this current point. Here's the HMON run right here for the 12Z. Similar situation to the H-WRF at first. The HMON really wants this to weaken down to a tropical storm as it approaches the Yucatan Peninsula, which I think is pretty interesting. And it's going to really depend on what happens in the next couple of days or so. Can the shear just absolutely tear it apart? Can the dry air get into the structure? Or will it not happen, and will it hold as a major hurricane as it approaches the Yucatan Peninsula? Then it starts to reorganize and redevelop slowly as it approaches land right here, makes landfall as a strong tropical storm. We're going to have to pay attention to that at this current point in time. Here's the halves A run right here. Similar situation right here, although it does sustain itself relatively well as a Category 1 or Category 2 hurricane as it makes landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula, weakens due to land interaction, then starts to reorganize and redevelop at this current point, makes landfall as a hurricane near the U.S.-Mexico border right there. So definitely something you're going to have to keep an eye on as we continue to get more information and as we continue to get more data right here. So that is the halves A model. Let's go ahead and show you the halves B right here. Organizing, developing, makes a very close pass to Jamaica right there and the Cayman Islands. It definitely sustains itself relatively well as a Category 1 or Category 2 hurricane, although it does make landfall a little bit further to the south than a lot of these models have been showing. And then it weakens due to land interaction, starts to quickly reorganize and redevelop, gets up to hurricane strength before making landfall in northeast Mexico over here. So overall, it does look like a South Texas, northeast Mexico landfall is becoming a lot more probable at this current point in time. And another thing I'm paying attention to is the possibility of a ridge weakening quick enough for this thing to shoot further up to the north and potentially impacting even further north up the Texas coast. So this is something we're going to have to pay attention to. I've been talking to my guys at Storms United about it, which, by the way, if you want to come hang out with us or watch the kind of conversation in real time, check it out, the Discord server. Link to that is right over there. But with that being said, we're closing the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps us out, helps us make more videos like these. The goal of this channel, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.